This is Barbara with Cana Girl Speaks podcast. My voice, your voice. Good evening, everybody. This is Barbara with the Cana Girl Speaks podcast, and I am so excited to be recording on this evening on how everybody out on YouTube land. And those that are listening to the podcast on the podcast sites like Anchor. But I want to say thank you always for supporting the Cana Girl Speaks podcast. And this evening, I have a young man that I've known for a while now. And he is actually a city official. And he actually is doing some other things. I'm going to let him explain it to you what he's also doing. But without further ado, I want to introduce to those that are watching on YouTube, Mr. Chris Woolsey. Hello.
Hey, Barbara. I appreciate you having me over here tonight.
Well, thank you. You have been on the podcast before, and so tell the those that are out that are watching on YouTube who Chris Woolsey is.
Right. So I'm on Corsicana City Council. This is my second term. And outside of that, my day job, I manage the shipping and logistics warehouse for Collins Street Bakery, and I do commercial real estate on the side. So I've got a pretty full plate.
Yes,
I like
you do.
to stay busy and have lots of things that I'm involved in that are helping folks out and making the community I live in a better place.
And you're also getting ready to hear wedding bells, right?
Yes. Yeah, we are counting down a few weeks to go on that one. So that's been quite a journey too. All the work that goes into that, all the planning. And so, yeah, you know how all of that goes.
Yeah, so congratulations on that. I'm happy for you.
Thank you. I appreciate
Happy for
it.
you. So the reason why I wanted to bring Chris on is because I'm sure everybody has heard and they've been, either reading about it or even seeing on local media about the appraisal notices. Dun, 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 dun. So everybody has, if you're a homeowner or business owner, they have gotten that notice in the mail. And so I wanted to bring him on because he has a little bit of knowledge about appraisals. And I wanted to bring him on to talk about the appraisal district. I wanted to bring him on to talk about, just explain it in layman's term, for those that are new homeowners, those that are wannabe homeowners. Let's just talk about that portion of, that entity, And so I even kind of like started doing research myself. I was like, okay, so when I'm a homeowner, and so like I was telling him earlier, I said, whenever we bought our home, it was like, file homestead. And then I had to go and look it up. What does homestead mean? So I wanted to bring Chris on to talk about the appraisal district, the appraisal notices and what that's all about for those that just want to get the information in layman's terms. So go ahead and explain a little bit about it.
Great. Yeah, I can do that. I'm glad there's folks out there who are interested in this because it's typically a topic that puts folks to sleep.
Yeah, it's a hot item right now, though.
It's a super hot item. So I'll start out just kind of trying to explain the basics of it. It's fairly complicated. It took me a long time to fully understand it. So if you don't understand it immediately after this podcast, do not feel bad. It takes a while. It's a pretty complicated system. So the way that property taxes work in the state of Texas is you have essentially two bodies who decide how much property tax you're going to have to pay each year. The first step of that process is your central appraisal district. They go out and they assign a value to your property. And their job is to go out and say, what is the actual value of your property? It's supposed to be a number within about 95% of the actual market value of your property. And so they do not assign any tax dollars that you have to pay. So when you get that appraisal and your first thought is, man, my taxes are going up, remember that it's not the appraisal district that collects taxes. It's not the appraisal district who decides how much you pay. Their job is to go out and assign an unbiased amount to what your property is worth.
Yeah.
And so that's the number that everybody just got in their mail this past month or so.
Yeah.
People looked at their house and it was worth $120,000 last year, and suddenly this year it's worth $190,000.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And their immediate thought is, oh no, I have to pay property taxes on a property worth $190,000. But there's a lot of factors that play into it. So for homeowners, the number one protection that you have against increasing property taxes is the Homestead Exemption. And so that's something you mentioned earlier. The Homestead Exemption is a designation that you can place on a property that says, I own this property and I'm designating this as my specific location that I designate as my primary residence. And when you put that designation on a piece of property, there's a lot of protections that come with that. Number one, you get an exemption for specific amounts of valuation off of your property. So for the city of Corsicana, if you live here, for a property, if it's worth, I don't know, $150,000 for your school portion of taxes, you have a $25,000 homestead exemption. And so if that property's worth $150,000, you're only going to get taxed on $125,000 worth of that value. Now that would only apply to whatever entity has exemptions that apply for all those different things. The most common exemptions that you have is a homestead. You have an over 65, you have disabled. Those are going to be your most common ones. The over 65, the big advantage that offers is that will freeze your school taxes. So the year that you turn 65, whatever your tax dollar amount was for that year, it's going to get frozen at that amount.
So do they have to go down and sign any paperwork to freeze it when they turn 65?
Yeah, you have to let them know that you're 65. They don't just keep up with that number. You actually have to do the legwork to tell them, hey, I'm 65, and then you'll be able to see that. So when you get that appraisal notice, you'll see some letters kind of on the bottom line. If it says HS, that means you have a homestead exemption. It'll say like 065 for over 65, and I think DS for disabled. Okay. Yeah, and so those all offer different forms of protection. So the appraisal is the first part of how your property taxes get calculated. So remember, when you get that notice, it's not your appraisal district that causes your taxes to go up. It is not the tax assessor who causes your taxes to go up. The tax assessor's job, I got some questions on this one, so I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, because people they want to put a face with the paperwork,
right? Right. So Mike Dowd, I'll have your back here. Your tax assessor does not increase your taxes. Your tax assessor's job is to do math and communicate math to taxing entities and tell them, hey, here is your valuations. Here is your no new revenue rate, which we'll get to in a second. Here's all the different math, and then you decide what you want to do with it and let me know. Okay. So if your taxes go up, don't go blaming your tax assessor collector. Don't go blaming your central appraisal district.
Yes.
Right.
And that's the reason why I wanted to bring Chris on, because I wanted him to explain that, because sometimes we really just don't know. And so I really appreciate you taking the time. So go ahead.
Yeah. So the second part of determining your property taxes is the tax rate. And this is a rate that is set by all of your taxing entities. So that would be in Corsicana, for example, that's going to be the city of Corsicana, Corsicana ISD, Navarro County, Navarro College, and then the Navarro County Road and Bridge Fund and the Navarro County Flood Control Fund. I'm sure there's one I forgot, but those are going to be the ones that you see. And so each of these taxing entities, which Barbara and I are both on one of these, so we are the ones who have to take responsibility for that tax rate. When we get those numbers in July, the tax assessor collector is going to tell us, hey, based on your valuation increases, here is the no new revenue rate. And that no new revenue rate is calculated to let every taxing entity know what the tax rate needs to be so that no additional tax dollars come out of pocket for residents from the previous year. Okay. It does not take into account additional growth. So for example, let's say that the two of us were the only taxpayers in this room last year. and then someone else moved in here. Now there's 3 people. That no new revenue rate is going to say for the 2 of y'all, your taxes are not going to go up if we pass the no new revenue rate. But your taxing entity is going to realize growth because now you have a third person over here.
Okay.
And then in the second year, that no new revenue rate would take into account the 3 of us if a 4th one moved in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So taxing entities will get that information late July, if I remember correctly. And then we all get to go back and start looking at our budgets, looking at what the valuations are, and determine what tax rate we want to levy. And so that burden falls on the city, the school board, the county, and the college board. So when your taxes go up, those are the entities that are responsible. So that responsibility falls on us to determine, do we want to take them down? Do they want more services? Does it stay the same? It's on us to determine that. And, I'll give a great example from last year for the city. We had a lot of people who came to us and said, hey, we want to see our firefighters paid more. Yeah. And we said, okay, there's a lot of them, for fire and police, that's a lot of employees. Yeah. And we did the math, and the amount that we saw that we could do is around $1 million. We said, okay, you want us to increase the level of services by $1 million worth of value. We can do that, but we are going to add that payroll, and then we added new positions as well. So this was additional service. And people told us, hey, we're okay with paying it. And so we spent, you remember it, we spent a long time talking about it. And I don't like property taxes, but people communicated to us that they wanted to see that increase in service. And so we said, okay, you asked for it, so we'll do it. When I've talked with folks in my precinct, the top 3 things that people told me that they wanted me to focus on was reducing the property tax burden, fixing streets, and improving our public safety. And so improving public safety, that was something that was super important to everybody, and they told me to work on, so that's something we got to work on. Yeah. When it comes to reducing the property tax burden, what that takes is each of our taxing entities looking at our budget and deciding to make hard choices. Yeah. Because the easy thing to do is to leave the tax rate at what it was last year and then just let the valuations increase. And so when the tax rate is left the same in a year where growth is seen, then taxes are going to go up. So
is it, since our community, and we're talking about Corsicana, the growth, do you as a council person, and also as what you do as far as the other job, not just the bakery, but the other job, do you pay the real estate part? So do you pay attention to the growth? Do you look at, okay, so where we see Corsicana in 5 years? Do you pay attention to that? Is that important as a homeowner, that when people are moving in, they're building houses, is that a part of the appraisal part? Is that to see, hey, we got new housing coming in?
So the appraisals, they are to reflect the value of the property as of January 1st. Okay. So the appraisal that you just got in your mail was a value based on your property's value from January 2nd, 2021 to January 1st, 2022. Okay. And so if your property has improved from January 2nd, 2022 until now, that value should be realized on next year's appraisal. Okay. Right. Okay. So it's you normally see kind of a 1-year lag in those valuations. And so everything that we saw this past April when these came out is the growth that we realized in 2021. Okay. And so if you see a new neighborhood, going up right now, we're going to realize that value next year. Next year. Right. Right. Year. So it all plays into it. And when you see new businesses come in, you get you get sales tax dollars come in a little bit quicker, and that property tax is coming in a little bit slower.
So on the community of Corsicana, that's a good thing for growth, right? Good thing for growth. Good thing to know that we're moving forward, And so, is that appealing to other business people, that are entities that are coming in? That hey, we can have good property value. We have homes being built. Is that a real good way to bring more companies in?
Right. In my opinion, the best way that we can appeal to companies coming in is not to give the abatements. I'm personally not a big fan of abatements, but they're sort of a necessary evil at this point.
Yeah.
But when we see the growth that we have year over year, the best thing that we can do is to reduce our property tax rates in each of the taxing entities to spread that amount out amongst the growth. And when companies are looking for somewhere to go, they're going to look at what that total tax rate is for a given area. And so for Corsicana, for example, our total tax rate is like 2.577. And the way that's calculated is $2.57 per $100 of valuation. And so if they look at Corsicana and they say, okay, the rate there is, $2.57. Let me look at what it is in McLennan County. Let me look at what it is in Ellis County. And if they're looking at half a dozen places and Corsicana is the highest total tax rate, they're going to say, scratch that one off the list. It's going to be more expensive to operate there.
Oh, wow.
If Corsicana has a lower total tax rate, that's going to be a whole lot more appealing.
Okay.
And so we are in this competition with areas around ours to be as appealing as possible. And so Corsicana has a ton of appealing things about it. And this is just one piece of the puzzle that if every taxing entity, looks at their budgets and looks at their operations and they make the most of the money and they can reduce that tax rate and get it to, at the very minimum, the no new revenue rate. That should be the goal for every taxing entity, is to look at that no new revenue rate.
So how important is it to talk to each other? Those entities, how important is it to talk to each other? Because if the city's not talking to the county, or the county's not talking to the school district, is that a good thing or bad thing? Should they all be talking to each other?
I wish that we had 2 meetings a year.
Yeah.
Where we got every taxing entity, in the county together, and we just had a big round table.
Yeah.
And we could at least communicate with each other.
Yeah.
I know the city and county, for example, we have joint meetings fairly often. We talk about our EMS program. But I think it would be a healthy thing for all of us if we had, at least in Corsicana.
Yeah.
If it was, city, county, school district, college board, if we all got together, I think that'd be a healthy thing for us.
Yeah. Yeah, because that way, you guys can know, what's to come.
Right.
You may know as a city council person that, hey, this is taking place, but then as a school district, we want to know, hey, what do we prepare for? Because, growth is coming,
Right.
And so, and I know you guys are preparing for that. So should a person that gets their appraisal notice, should they go ahead and start appealing? Should they go ahead and sign up to appeal? What's the, do you recommend appealing?
Right.
And what's the best way to appeal, for those that this is their first time getting their notice? Because we got some new homeowners.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, I'm sure they're like, what do I do with this?
Right. Right. So back to the homestead exemptions. If you have a homestead exemption on your property, the taxable value can only go up 10% in a given year. So let me pick something that's got easy math. If your property was $100,000 last year, and this year it comes out to $150,000, the amount that you can be taxed on can only go up 10% at a time.
Yeah.
The state legislature put a cap on that to help protect homeowners from seeing like a 50% increase in taxes in 1 year. And so that means if it was $100,000 last year, $150,000 value this year, then the taxable value is only going to go up to $110,000. And then next year it can go up to $120,000, $21,000. It
Yeah,
can only go
okay.
up 10% per year until it meets with that market value.
Yeah.
And so if you've got a homestead property, you'll see a couple of different lines. You'll see one that says total market value, and that's what they're saying the actual market value is. And then you'll see one, I think it'll be assessed value, and that one should be 10% higher than what it was last year. So something a lot of homestead properties are going to experience this year is appraisals that are so far beyond that 10% cap that even if you protest it, you're not going to realize a tax savings this year.
Okay.
I would still recommend folks protest. And for, I know, at least for Navarro County, you can protest online.
Yeah.
And when you get that appraisal form, if you flip it over on the back, it's got the protest form that you can mail that one in, but that's essentially the same form that you'll see online.
Okay. Should you take pictures and, go around and look at other houses about your size and compare?
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. If you're wanting to try and do it yourself, it's possible to do it yourself. If you're able to get more accurate sales comps, that makes it a whole lot more likely that you will succeed. Because you have to prove to the appraisal district, hey, this is what the value actually is, and then they have to prove to you that the records they used were actually correct.
So explain to them about that process. Is when you do protest and appeal, is it who makes the final decision? Is it the board? Is it the chief appraisal person? Who makes the final decision?
Right. So if you fill out that online protest and you send it in, someone from the appraisal district is going to contact you, and you'll have an informal conference. And you'll sit down with an appraisal employee, and they'll say, okay, here's the 3 houses that we compared it against. Here's why our math checks out. And if you say that math doesn't check out, you used a house that is totally remodeled. That one's got granite counters. Mine's still got, factory everything. Then they'll come back and say, okay, instead of $150,000, we'll settle on $120,000.
Okay.
All right. But back to our previous example, if it was $100,000 last year, $150,000 this year, and they say we'll settle on $120,000, you're still hitting your 10% cap.
Yeah. And
then next year, You've got a cap coming again. So you still haven't realized a tax savings, simply because we're in this situation where real estate values have just skyrocketed. And in a situation like this, it's going to be difficult to protest some of those values down below what that 10% cap is.
So do you see, I know they say it's a seller's market and all that. Do you see a bubble? Do you see like, okay, it's going to stop? Or do you see like, it's going to keep going because it's Texas?
Yeah.
And people are coming to Texas.
That's a tough one. Because if I say a bubble's coming, then it's not going to come for 5 years. If I say no, that's not happening, it'll crash tomorrow.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's really, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you on that.
Just wait and see.
I do know. Like if you want to buy property, chances are that it's just going to get more expensive to buy property. The Fed's raising basis points, and so interest rates are going up. And so the cost of borrowing money is getting higher. A year ago, we saw refinance rates that were below 2.5%. And now, if you get something under 5%, you might not be able to do that anymore. I haven't checked this week, but I know the Fed raised rates, and so we're probably looking at above 5% at least for that borrowing rate.
So how important is it for the young people that are watching and listening on the podcast to be homeowners? Because sometimes some people are renters, but how important is it to be a homeowner as far as investing in a home?
Yeah. Your home is most likely the single largest investment that you'll make. It's a great way to invest your living expenses. So if you are a renter, you're paying property taxes still. That's a common myth is people think, oh, I just rent my house you're still paying property taxes. There's probably 25% or so of what your rent is. Your landlord is never seeing it.
Oh, wow.
It's going to property taxes. And so people think that landlords are just sitting on a pile of cash because their rent is $1,800 a month. No, like 25% of that, they're never seeing. And then the rest of that is going to the loan, to the insurance, and rental properties don't have the same protections that homesteads do. So your rental property, there's a real possibility that if, going back to our example, if it was $100,000 last year and it's $150,000 this year, that's a 50% increase in rates. Wow. And there's no cap protection.
Oh my goodness.
So that property could see a 50% jump in property taxes in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
And if that happens, your property taxes are going to go up 50% and somebody's got to pay that.
And so that means your rent is probably going to go up too.
Your landlord can't afford to just cover that for you. I mean, if they did, they'd just be losing money. And so they got to pass that along.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you want to just tell those that are, learning? I mean, if not just learning, but just don't have have an understanding about the appraisal notices, appraisal, because my reason why I wanted to bring Chris on was to just try to explain it where everybody can at least understand a little bit more about the appraisal process. And so,
right.
Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I would just say that you have two good tools at your disposal. Number one is protesting the valuation. That's your fact check, so to speak, on the appraisal district and making them show their work and prove that your property is actually worth what they say it is. The second major tool that you have is influencing your local taxing entities. So showing up to your city council, your county commissioner, your school board, your college board meetings, and when they're talking about property tax rates here in July and August, telling them, hey, we want the no new revenue rate, or saying these are the services that we expect. Reduce this rate, reduce our burden. We just saw values skyrocket, and you have to lower the tax rate in order to compensate for that, so that you're not seeing a massive tax increase on homeowners and businesses in the city.
So for those that are watching, and if you're watching from in another city, I mean, how important it is to get involved in your local governments, because sometimes people tend to, okay, well, I voted for them, they're going to represent me. But how important it is to show up and, ask questions, be a voice. How important is that?
It's super important. Your local elections are what impact you.
Yes, I believe that too.
I ran for city council because I didn't like my property tax bill going up. And I said, someone needs to do something about this. Looks like I'm someone. And so I wanted to do something about it. And so, I've tried to do my best on city council to find ways to reduce the property tax burden. I think anybody getting involved in it, we've kind of seen a resurgence in interest in local politics over the past year or so. So voting in May elections, knowing who your school board members are, knowing who your county commissioners are, knowing who your city council members are. These are the people that determine the things that impact you most. Everyone gets caught up in the pomp and circumstance of who's president, who's Senate, who's Congress. That really doesn't affect your life a whole lot.
Yeah, the local elections.
Yeah, when you drive home after work and you drive on that street, pull into your house, and you turn on the water faucet, the city is the one who's making sure that happens, or the county is the one making sure that happens. When you send your kids off to school and you hope they're prepared for life, it's the school school board who's impacting that. So the things that touch your daily lives, that is all impacted by city, county, school. And people tend to not do those elections because it's, those are small. You can't really impact a whole lot. And it really impacts your life a whole lot more than than anything higher would.
And I know I seen not just it's a sidebar, but we talk about just recently we got the announcement about Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like they came out of the woodworks, people are like, man, I'm like, oh my goodness. And all that to me, that's local. That's local.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would come more to the meetings and be involved in what's going on, you would learn a lot more. The Economic Development Organization, just come and just be involved in that. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why it is important to get involved in our local entities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Chris, I want to say thank you, so
Mm-hmm.
much for being on the Cana Girl Speaks podcast. Now, I always give my guests an opportunity to give their shout outs to anybody that'd like to give their shout outs to. So go ahead and give your shout out.
I will give my shout out to my fiance Courtney, who is supposed to be making me cookies while I'm over here doing the podcast. But yeah, my shout out goes to her. We'll be getting married here in a certain number of weeks. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but she keeps the math on that. And another shout out as well to my grandmother, who is moving to Corsicana this week.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So my parents moved here 3 or 4 years ago now. And now my grandmother is moving here this week. And so
wow.
I'm excited to have my whole family here.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for you.
Well,
I'm excited for everything that you're doing for our community because,
Thank you.
I've watched you, since you came and got involved. I mean, you hit the ball rolling whenever you came here. So I really appreciate, your service to the community.
Well, thank you, Barbara.
And so to those that were listening on this evening, I hope you got some valuable information from what Chris was saying. If you have any questions, I'm sure he's just a phone call away because he's a city council person. So y'all give him a call and say, and like he said, don't go after the tax assessor. They have nothing to do with the appraisal notices.
Yeah, that's right. Come if you want to go after someone who wants to take responsibility, come to a city council meeting, your county commissioner meeting, your school board meeting.
Yeah.
We're the ones where the buck stops.
That's right. That's right. And be involved. Get involved. That's just the big thing for me is get involved. And so with that being said, I want to say thank you always for supporting the Cana Girl Speaks podcast. Have a safe evening and have a awesome weekend. Good night.
This is a Legacy Recording Studio production.